Pakistan continues to send drones which are effectively dismantled and destroyed by our air defense system. What does this new round of escalation mean? Nikunj, a quick analysis on that. Are we looking now at a scenario where it is likely to be a prolonged conflict?
And Maria, again, just as yesterday, it is difficult to answer in yes, a straight yes or no. But quite clearly, the Pakistanis have chosen a path which is fraught with extreme danger and is a slippery slope, I say, towards extremely high degree of escalation. Irrespective of howsoever much the restraint the Indian forces, Indian establishment and Indian government has displayed thus far, these situations are hair-trigger situations which on their own, because of the kinetic energy behind them, on their own have the potential to escalate into something much larger and bigger. And therefore, if the good sense prevails on Chinese and the Pakistanis, I am now Maria, after a week of this kind of escalation, I am now specifically moving my needle towards the Chinese, because they are the ones, much more than the Americans, who can convince Pakistanis to stand down. And therefore, their role becomes important. If they now convince the Pakistani establishment, Pakistani military establishment completely, that this is an extremely dangerous path that they are trying to traverse upon, and the result of it would be an extreme destruction of resources that Pakistani value extremely, and all of them are mostly military resources. If they are able to convince the Pakistanis, then we can see some amount of disengagement and from here on de-escalation. However, if that doesn't happen and Pakistanis continues to choose, remember the Indian establishment's patience with Pakistan generally, and in this case also, wears thin. The nation's patience wears thin, and consequently the armed forces and consequently the government's patience also wears thin. And if a situation comes to that, where all the safe exit routes being provided to the Pakistani military establishment are choked, then for sure we are looking at a much more, I will not call it a wider escalation, I will not even call it a full-blown conflict or something like that, but what I am saying at this point of time is then we are certainly looking at a much more prolonged conflict and not something that ends very, very quickly.
Okay, and I'll ask the producers to put those graphics on our television screens, because we have details of the background of Pakistan's new ISPR chief. He's the son of Osama bin Laden-linked scientist who had infamously said, "Jinns can make electricity." So there is no scientific temperament per se. How do you deal with men of this nature? How do you deal with General Asim Munir? How do you deal with Ahmad Sharif Chaudhry? Nikunj, these are generals in charge of Pakistan right now. There was a call that was made by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The call went straight to General Asim Munir, because he understands that he is the one calling the shots right now, not the civilian establishment, not Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. But these are men who are hardline fundamentalists.
Well, Maria, the fact of the matter is that I've been discussing this with multiple guests of ours. These are jihadis, or these are generals. You wish to call them by jihadi generals, as some of the papers and some of the magazines have tried to put them. But remember, they are professional soldiers, and their capacity to follow through their actions or halt those actions that they see dangerous and moving into a dangerous trajectory is fully there. These men are hardline men, but remember, they are also trained professional soldiers. So it is not that they are devoid of common sense or devoid of military strategy or devoid of military common knowledge. They have that, and in abundance. They are hardliners, but then there is enough reason and enough knowledge and enough acumen with them to see the reason if they wish to see so. Now the point here is that is Pakistan doing all of this escalation on its own, or is it acting as someone's cat's paw at this point in time, after having engaged Indian forces for now almost close to a week? That is a question that obviously we will have to ask experts, and obviously the answers to that will come in some time. However, when we go to the chief of the ISI, who is also a General Asim's man, General Asim Munir's right-hand chosen man, you have to keep one thing in mind, Maria, that General Asim Munir also himself, of course a hardliner, but when Marco Rubio speaks to him, as you were mentioning, Marco Rubio and the Americans have now realized that the real lever of power in Pakistan when it comes to India-Pakistan military escalation is the army chief of Pakistan. And General Asim Munir also understands the importance of that call. You may have friends in China and you may have friends in Turkey, but the Americans have always been the principal pivot of the Pakistan's military establishment. They may have moved away from the Pakistani military establishment in the last few years or, you can say last one decade, but the Americans still wield a tremendous amount of influence when it comes to Pakistani military establishment. So General Asim Munir has the capacity to appreciate all of that. What he chooses to do next is obviously something that will become clearer with the passage of time.
All right, let me bring in Shivarur at this juncture. He's joining me from Srinagar. We also have other reporters joining us. Ghazali will be joining us from Rajouri. I can see Nazir Masoodi live with us and Aishwarya Jain. Aishwarya, the Tri-Services Chief are at South Block. Any moment that crucial press conference will begin. It will become important because it will give us details of the number of military bases which has been targeted by India. Remember, India, when it all began, let's make that distinction for our viewers. Operation Sindoor began with India targeting and dismantling only the terror bases, terror infrastructure inside Pakistan. This move by India this morning, roughly around 4:35 a.m., was India targeting military air bases inside Pakistan. It was retaliatory move because over the last 72 hours, there has been repeated ceasefire violations and targeting and shelling by Pakistanis along the LOC, and multiple villages have been destroyed. That is the reason why what happened this morning will be seen as a retaliatory move by India, not an act of aggression. A word now from Aishwarya, who continues to be with us. Aishwarya, what exactly are you seeing at the moment?
And also, Maria,
yes, please.
Also, Maria, stubbing out the bases or stubbing out the positions that the Pakistanis are repeatedly using to pummel our civilian population. That's the agenda and that's the objective of our retaliatory strike on these places.
All right. Ash,